Hello, it's Anna, and for today we'll be learning about how to respond to events and how we can use callbacks to when you're responding to these events. So events include like clicking, key presses, when the window loads, and other events, and we can add like callbacks to the functions, and we'll learn about that in this video. So if you like this video, give this video a like, of course, and if you want to see more from us, we do have our channel, so consider subscribing to us, and hitting that bell notification will give you more updates of new videos from us. So let's get started.
Okay, we're going to talk about callbacks, and callbacks are a fundamental concept in JavaScript, especially when you're dealing with asynchronous operations or events. So when we say asynchronous, that means that these operations or events are not happening at the same time, or it takes some time to happen or actually complete. And a callback is a function that is passed into another function as an argument and executed after a certain event occurs or an operation completes. So this is particularly useful in JavaScript, where many operations such as network requests, file operations, or timers are, asynchronous. And I'm going to show you a simple example of that with our code today. So you can code along with me, and you can create a folder in your desktop like I have here. It says JavaScript practice, and we're also going to need Visual Studio Code for this one, and this will serve as our code editor to create our JavaScript file. And if you don't have that downloaded in your machines, I recommend that you download Visual Studio Code, and this is actually the most popular code editor as of now for most developers too. So then once you have Visual Studio Code, just open up the folder that you have into that, and I already have it opened right here. And as you can see, my JavaScript folder practice is right here. And in this one, we're going to create a new file. So just click this icon right here, and we're going to name this script.js. Okay, and we're also going to need an HTML file. So let's just say this is index.html to actually see what's happening in our script. Okay, so let's start with our HTML file. Let's just simply type in doc. There we go, and click the first thing that pops up. And we don't really need to do anything here. This is the boilerplate for our HTML documents and web pages, and we don't need to put in anything in here actually. Maybe let's just name this callbacks. There we go. And we're primarily going to be working on our script right here. And before we continue, let's actually connect our script into our HTML file right here. So let's write inside the body, script source, and then the name of our file, which is script.js, and then self-closing bracket. Or maybe we can actually, there we go. There we go. So we have an opening and a closing for our script. Now we can head into our script.js and actually write what callbacks are. So we're going to create some functions right here. And I want you to think that functions are first-class objects, which means that they can be passed around like any other value. So like variables, you can pass variables as parameters or as arguments, as well as functions. You can do that too with them. And with callback functions, these are simply functions that is passed into another functions with the expectation that the latter will execute it at the appropriate time. So let's actually create here our first function. Okay, so this first function is the one we'll be passing on as our callback function. So let's just simply name this greeting, and we'll put in the name parameter in this one. And this will simply put out an alert of hello space, and then we'll concatenate that with a name parameter that we will be entering. Okay, that's all we need for our callback function. As I said, this is going to be very simple. And we're going to create another function right here. And this is processing the user input. Okay, because we're actually going to ask for the user input to put in the name. And for this one, we'll put in the callback function. Let's say callback. So this is supposedly going to be a function, which is this greeting function that we created. Okay, and let's create a variable right here, and this will be the name. And we'll say prompt, and we'll just simply say, please enter your name. Okay, there we go. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. And finally, we can now call this callback function from the parameter into this function. Let's say callback, and as you remember, this is a function, so let's put in some parentheses. And supposedly, this callback function is this greeting function. So we actually need this parameter right here, and for that parameter, we'll put in the name that we asked from the user. So let's just call that into the parameter. Okay, and finally, we can call the process user input function, and for this one, we'll put in the greeting function as our callback. All right, And what will happen with this one is process user input will run, and then it will prompt the user to enter their name. And once the user, of course, this is an asynchronous event because it's going to wait for the user to enter their name. And once they have entered their name, they will call back to the greeting function and put that in the name that the user input here to greet them, hello, and then the name that the user input. So let's actually see that in our index.html. So let's open that up here. Here we go. And now this page is asking for, of course, a prompt. And let's say my name is Anna. Okay. And there we go. We have hello, Anna. So it waited for my input before it actually alerted us or run the function that we put in. So that's a very simple explanation of what callbacks are. Okay, and now I'm going to show you how to respond to events with callbacks. So callbacks are widely used to respond to user events in the browser. So these events include clicks, keystrokes, and other interactions. So you might use a callback to handle like a button click event. And I'll show you that right now. So let's go to our index.html file. And right under the body, let's actually just create a button tag right there. And let's give this one an ID of my button. Oops. There we go. And let's just say click me for this one. Okay. And finally, we can go to our script.js and we can remove all of this. We don't need it for now. And let's create a function that will handle our click event. So let's call this function handle click. And then we're not going to put any parameters in here. And we're just going to simply log out something. Let's console log right here with a log shortcut. And let's say button was clicked. There we go. And after that, that's all we need for the function right there. And we're actually going to use DOM manipulation right here, which is another topic. You can watch our other videos to learn more about it. But simply put, we're just getting something from our HTML file, and we're going to use that and manipulate that in our JavaScript file. So for this one, we're going to get the button. So let's just create a variable called button right here. And we're going to get the document and we're going to get an element by ID. And you can also get the element with DOM manipulation with class name and name and other things. But we're going to stick with ID for this one because if you can remember, we set an ID for the button that we created in our HTML file. And for this one, let's just call the my button ID that we put for our button. So let me actually check that if that is the correct ID. And there you go. It is. Let's go back to our script.js. And finally, we can use the add event listener function. And this serves as the function we will put in our callback function too. So let's call for the button. So this is getting the button element. And we're going to add an event listener to that. Okay, so we do have other videos too that discusses event listeners more, but basically event listeners is telling script.js to wait for something to happen and then do something after that event happens. And for this one, it takes in 2 parameters, and we're going to put in the click argument, and this will serve as our first parameter for the event that we're listening for. And then we're going to put in the callback for the second parameter. So for this one, we're going to get the handle click event that we created, or I mean the function that we created right here. And what this should do is when the user clicks the button, it performs this function, which is logging out to the console the thing that we want it to. All right, so let's save that. So Control S, but as for me, I already have autosave checked out here, so I don't have to Control S every time manually, which makes things easier for me. And now let's go to our index.html. All right, so we have it right here, and we have a button, of course, that we put in our HTML, and we're just gonna click that. Let me actually open up, right click and inspect elements, so we can open up our console right here, right there, and we will see what happens. So let's click that event, and there we go. We can see the button was clicked, and that is the thing that we were aiming for. So that's how you can use callbacks when responding to events such as clicks and maybe key presses on the keyboard, or maybe even when the window loads, you can use callbacks. Okay, now we're actually gonna put it in a more practical scenario. We're gonna simulate fetching data asynchronously, maybe from a server. So we're gonna do that right here. So we can actually use callback with that more practical example of fetching data. So let's go ahead here and create a function, and we'll call this fetch data. Okay, and this function right here will take in a parameter or a callback function parameter. So let's just call this callback. Okay, and this will be a function. We'll put in that later on. And for this, we're gonna simulate a 2-second delay for our fetching our data. We're not actually fetching real data, but we're just simulating it. So let's set a timeout right here. Okay, so this is a built-in function for JavaScript wherein you're setting a couple of seconds before something actually happens. And inside this, we're gonna put in an arrow function. Okay, so just a quick explanation of arrow functions. These function the same way as a normal functions, but we write it this way. So it's a shorthand essentially of functions. And we call it arrow because this equal sign and the greater than sign, it kind of resembles an arrow. And we also call this an anonymous function because this function doesn't have a name, unlike most of functions. Okay, and this anonymous function will create a constant variable named data, and this will be an object. As most data comes in, most comes in object form. And for that, we're just gonna put in a message for this one, and the value of this message would be data fetched successfully. Okay. All right. And let's close that off with a semicolon right here. And after that, we're going to call this callback function we put in the parameter. Okay, so we're calling back to that. And this will actually take in a parameter, and that is the parameter for the data that we created right here. Okay, and we'll create that function later on. And after this function, we're gonna set in this set timeout method. We're gonna put in how many seconds or delay it will do before it actually runs this function that we put in here. So let's say it's 2 seconds. So this is measured with milliseconds. So we're just gonna put 2000, which is equivalent to 2 seconds. Okay. And now we're actually going to create the callback function that we'll put in this function as our callback. Okay, or our parameter. So let's go ahead and put a function right here, and we'll name this process data, because after fetching data, we can now process the data. And for this one, we'll take in the parameter of the data. So what data we're processing. And inside this, we're just gonna simply log out to the console, processing data, and then comma, we're gonna get the data object. So the data and dot message, the message property. There we go, because we did put that when we created that data object. And it's just gonna show that message with this log right here. Now that we've got all that, we just need to call this fetch data function right here. And for that one, the parameter or the argument we're putting into this will be the process data function that we created. All right, so let's actually see how this goes. Okay, so now I have my index.html open, and as you can see in the console, it did that, process the data and fetch the data successfully. So let me actually repeat that again. Let's reload the page, and as you'll notice, there's like a 2-second delay before this shows up. So I'll actually go back to my code, and actually let's do this for 5 seconds just so we can see much of a difference. Okay, so let's go back and I'll refresh the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it should show up right there. So that is how we use callbacks when it comes to asynchronous events and asynchronous operations like fetching the data, for example. So I hope you learned something from our this tutorial today, and we hope to see you in another video. And yeah, give this video a like if you've learned something. So see you next time.